Hey, what's going on? Zach D Productions here, and I'm here for an album ranking video for you guys. So for this ranking, I'll be re-ranking the studio discography of metal legends, Metallica. Now, I know I've done a Metallica ranking before on the channel. That was a while ago, and if you are someone here on YouTube that does similar content that I do, music content, chances are you've done a Metallica ranking on your channels. But I know that a lot of people have actually done re-rankings, updated 2023 album rankings, because if you didn't know, Metallica released a new album last April, 72 Seasons. So I figured I'd jump on the bandwagon as well and do a re-ranking for this band. So I will do a re-rank for Metallica, including their newest album, 72 Seasons. Now keep in mind, we're just going to stick with the main studio albums. This means no live albums, compilations, covers albums, EPs, nothing like that. Just the main albums by Metallica. And we're also not including Lulu either. That is technically a collaboration album. But if that were on the ranking, it would easily be bottom of the barrel, if we're honest here. But anyhow, let's go ahead and get started with what I have last as their weakest album. And this album here has always been at the bottom for me. It probably will never leave the bottom of the ranking. It's got to be Saint Anger, which I'm sure is no surprise to many people and many fans. I know that some people go as far to say that this is the worst metal album ever made. I personally wouldn't go that far, but it's definitely their worst album if you don't include Lulu, of course. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that this album is as bad as a lot of fans say it is. I know that some people say, oh, there's not one good song on this album. I'm sorry, but I'm calling BS on that. I mean, I do like Frantic. I think Frantic is a good song and probably my favorite on the album. And I do like The Unnamed Feeling as well. That's another pretty good track. I mean, I wouldn't say that these songs are amazing or anything, but I think they're good in their own right. And the title track, it's decent. It's listenable, I guess. Some Kind of Monster, I could really say the same thing about. But you do have some of their worst songs on this album, like Shoot Me Again and All Within My Hands. Purify's not that good either, so yeah. Honestly, their worst album, I mean, everything from the production to the drum sound, it basically sounds like Lars is hitting tin cans or something, garbage cans. I mean, you don't really have the solos on here either, so yeah. Overall, just not a very strong album. I mean, I do appreciate that it's different for Metallica, and I know that other people have made that argument as well, that they at least appreciate that it's something different from the band, but all in all, not a very strong album. So honestly, the only album out of the bunch here that I would say is bad. The rest here go from just being decent to good to just absolutely awesome. But this album here, not really that good. Easily their worst. Next, we got Reload, which is definitely another one of their worst. This does have some of their weakest material as well, such as Low Man's Lyric, which I know that this song does have its fan base. There's some people that actually really dig that song, but it's personally not for me. Not real crazy about it. But you do have Fuel and Memory Remains, which I think are really good songs, actually. You have the Unforgiven Part 2 as well, which I also think is good. And in the second half, when it comes to songs in the second half of the album, I do like the song Where the Wild Things Are. Probably the best song of the second half of this album, in my opinion. But yeah, not really a metal album. It's more hard rock driven, but overall, I'd say the album is decent. I wouldn't go as far to say it's one of their best. I mean, it's definitely nowhere near one of their best, but yeah, so Reload, I'd say it's decent at best. Again, they were trying some different things. Some songs it works, some songs it doesn't. But next we have Death Magnetic, which I know that some people actually might have higher because, oh, it's a return to form for Metallica. It's a return to their thrash roots. Honestly, I don't really return to this album very much. This album definitely struggles from a lot of things. Everything from the production, which I know is kind of the norm to complain about the production of this album. This loud production doesn't really work. And some of these songs really do just drag on. They drag on for way too long, in my opinion. I mean, there are some good tracks on the album for sure, like That Was Just Your Life, Broken, Beaten, Scarred, The Day That Never Comes, All Nightmare Long. And you do have the third, Unforgiven, on here, which is probably my least favorite of the Unforgiven trilogy from Metallica, but it's decent. I mean, it's not all bad. So, Death Magnetic, there's some good tracks on here. Overall, again, I'd say it's decent. But next we got Load, which I do think is way better than Reload in my opinion. And I know that a lot of fans would say the same thing. Now, yes, you do have your Reload defenders who will say that that album is better than this, but I personally don't think so. I think Load is a far better album than Reload. I mean, I think this album is really good, actually. I mean, I know that some people hate this album or just simply don't like it, but for me, I like the album, actually. I mean, I think from this point on in the ranking, we're getting into very strong material from Metallica. I mean, yes, on this album, it's definitely different from what they've done before. Before this, you know, they were more thrash-driven, and then they go and do this, and some people say they sold out. You know, this is more hard rock than heavy metal, again, but there are some good tracks on here. I mean, you got 2x4, The House Jack Built, Until It Sleeps, King Nothing. I mean, these few songs alone, I think, are really strong, really great. And you have Bleeding Me, which I think is good. Mama Said, which is the country song on here, I actually think is not bad. I mean, is it one of my favorites on the album? No, but it's not bad. And you, of course, have Hero of the Day on here as well, which is pretty good. But yeah, pretty good songwriting. Definitely not as bad as a lot of people say it is. I mean, I personally dig the album. So, Load. And Load, I think, is a good example of Metallica doing something different and it working as well. But next, we got Hardwired to Self-Destruct. Now, I did become a fan of Metallica around the time when this was coming out. I want to say I became a fan in like August of 2016, and then this came out that fall. I do remember that, which I know some people might say, wow, really? You're kind of late to the band. And I do realize that, but whatever. But yeah, this album here, it's pretty good. I do think it's a step up from Death Magnetic for sure. It's definitely more thrashy, I'd say. Definitely leans closer to their classic sound than Death Magnetic did. I mean, you do have some good songs on here like Atlas Rise, Moth into Flame, which when I saw Metallica live, they did play Moth into Flame live, which was amazing. You know, they actually use like these flames and they use fireworks and stuff. It was really cool. I mean, if you haven't seen Metallica live yet, definitely do so if you get the chance. But yeah, I really enjoyed that song live especially. And you have Halo on Fire, and you have Spit Out the Bone, which is pretty good as well. So yeah, a lot of strong tracks on this album. I'd say it's a pretty good album. So Hardwired, overall, pretty good album. But then we got their latest album, 72 Seasons, which I know that a lot of people actually do prefer Hardwired over this album, which is kind of a surprise to me, because I actually really enjoyed this album. I mean, that title track is really solid, and you have Lux Eterna, you have Chasing Light, Shadows Follow, you have Darkness Had a Sun. I mean, you could really go on and on about this album. I think that this is a pretty strong album, actually, and I do think that this leans even closer more to their classic sound than Hardwired did. They kind of took ideas from their entire discography and made it into one. I mean, I do enjoy this album for what it is. It's a very strong album, and it's also one of my favorite albums of the year as well, so there you go. 72 Seasons, really good album. So next we got their debut, Kill 'Em All, which is a very strong debut. I know it's been regarded as one of the best debuts in metal, and understandably so. A lot of great tracks on here as well. I mean, you do have Dave Mustaine taking some of the writing credit as well, of course, before he got kicked out of Metallica. But yeah, a lot of great tracks on here. Of course, you have Hit the Lights, The Four Horsemen, Motor Breath, Jump in the Fire, Whiplash. No Remorse, Seek and Destroy, which is a classic. A lot of great tracks, a lot of great solid riffage on this album, and just classic sounding thrash. It's a great debut, really strong debut for Metallica. So now we got the Black Album, which is their commercially successful album, or basically their biggest album, and I want to say that it's also the best-selling heavy metal album of all time as well. If it's not number one, I want to say it's somewhere in the top 5, but yeah. They definitely took their sound in a more commercial direction on this album. I mean, you can definitely tell right away with some of these songs like Enter Sandman and Nothing Else Matters. Even The Unforgiven, which, I mean, I like all these songs. Now, Enter Sandman, I really don't need to hear again. It's kind of an overplayed song, but for what the song is, it's good. But you do have other great tracks on here, like Sad But True, Holier Than Thou. You have Wherever I May Roam, which is probably one of my personal favorite Metallica songs. Through the Never, The Struggle Within, really great closing track. But yeah, so the Black Album, really good. I even enjoy the ballads on here, like The Unforgiven and Nothing Else Matters. Good songs. So there you have it. The Black Album, I'd say it's a great album, actually. But next we got And Justice for All, which is probably their proggiest album, their more complex album, and yeah, it's got to rank at number 3 for me. I really dig this album a lot. I mean, I think from this point on in the ranking, you could really make the argument that there's no bad song. I mean, I think the first 5 albums from Metallica, there's not really a bad song on any of the first 5 albums from the band, but yeah. So with that said, I pretty much dig everything on this album, but just to name some favorites: Blackened, the title track, One, Harvester of Sorrow, The Frayed Ends of Sanity, Dyer's Eve. I mean, come on. Great riff work. I mean, I know that some people complain about the lack of bass, but I mean, the album for what it is, it's really great, I think. Definitely a classic, great album. So next we got Master of Puppets, which was actually my first Metallica album. The first one I checked out, the first CD from them I ever picked up. A great introduction to the band. Honestly, this album and What's at Number 1 are great introductions if you're wanting to check out this band. But again, not a bad song on here. I mean, you do have Battery, one of my all-time favorite Metallica songs. I could really say the same for the title track, Master of Puppets. I mean, not only a Metallica classic, but a heavy metal classic. The Thing That Should Not Be is so underrated. I love this song. Probably one of my favorites on the album as well. Always has been one of my favorites. You have Disposable Heroes, Leper Messiah. I mean, you could really go on and on about this classic. It's a classic album, and if you claim to be a fan of any type of metal or rock or anything, this album is a must-own in your collection. It's a great album, so there you have it. It's a classic. But at number 1, I'm sure a lot of you already know what's at number 1 at this point. It's got to be Ride the Lightning. Now, for the longest time, this has remained my favorite Metallica album. I mean, this album has no skips. It's nearly a perfect album. I absolutely love this album. I would probably even go as far to say that it's one of my favorite albums of all time, to be quite honest. Absolutely dig this album. It's a classic. Fight Fire with Fire, the title track. Now, the title track is probably another one of my favorite Metallica songs. I could really say the same for Fade to Black. I absolutely love Fade to Black. It's a phenomenal song. And you also have For Whom the Bell Tolls. You have Trapped Under Ice and Escape. Now, a lot of people point to Escape as being one of Metallica's worst songs, but I don't think so at all. I think the song is good, actually. Is it the worst song on the album? Probably, but even with saying that, it's still good. It's still a good track. Creeping Death is also one of my favorite Metallica songs as well. So there you have it. Ride the Lightning is my favorite Metallica album, and that's what's ranking at number 1. A great album, and if you have not checked it out yet, do yourself a favor. Listen to it. Listen to this album. It's great. So let me know what you think. That is my Metallica album ranking, my updated ranking for this band. Let me know what you think. How would you rank Metallica's albums, including 72 Seasons? Feel free to let me know. What did you think of this ranking? So on that note, thanks for watching. Have a good one.